guys to the Dogs of War YouTube channel. Today we have the unboxing of Upstalk, the new pack of the new cycle. Today we have here Angelo and we have Tree. So let's start right into the pack. So you want to start with it, Tree?
Absolutely. The first card in our pack is Domestic Sleepers. It's a House Bioroid agenda. It is worth 0 agenda points and requires 2 advancement counters to score it.
So bad.
And it has the text, you can spend 3 clicks to place an agenda counter on Domestic Sleepers. It is worth 1 agenda point while it has at least 1 agenda counter on it. This is an interesting agenda in that it doesn't give anything to the runner. So that's a good thing for it. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of not so good things for it. It essentially costs you 5 clicks to score this card to actually get your 1 point out of it. And it is an additional agenda in your deck that doesn't count towards your agenda points in the deck, so it means you're running more agendas in your deck than you normally would. Thoughts, guys?
Yeah, at the beginning that didn't key to me. I was like, well, it sounds good, but not worth against your total was kind of rough. I think it's a good idea, but it's in the wrong faction right now, and I'm hoping that each faction gets one. It'll be kind of good for MBN. You steal an agenda, don't get a point, and I can steal seasons you. Very good with Jinteki if they get one too.
Jinteki loves dealing you damage for not getting points, and it helps Philotic Entanglement if they get one.
Yeah, it does, but to touch on what you just said, here's the thing about this. They don't have to steal it. There's nothing in the rules that says when you access an agenda, you actually have to steal it.
Yes, it does, actually.
Does it really?
Yeah. Yes, when you access an agenda, you score it.
Yeah. I guess it's never come up before where you never would want to.
Unless it's NAPD or any other agenda that has a cost requirement.
Yes.
And you're not required to spend the money for NAPD or for Fetal AI, even if you have it.
It makes you wonder if this card's not in here because we're going to see something further down the line that says for every agenda the runner has in his score area, do X. And if that's the case, then it's a great setup card because now you want to feed them these 0 costs then if they have to steal them. And then you have some piece of ice that's like, do a brain damage for every agenda that's in the runner's area. Not agenda point, but just agenda card that's up there. But as it stands now, if this had been neutral, maybe some decks would have played it, but...
I do have one other positive thing to say about it. If you score it and get to 6 points, you just told your opponent they have 1 turn left to win the game.
Yeah, it's true.
Which can be a good place to be.
And for the runner, they could data deal it if they steal it.
Yeah,
trying to make bad cards good.
With Ian Sterling, I think Data Dealer is going to make a comeback.
Yeah.
I mean,
also, I have a feeling that FFG is going to do something with counters and agendas.
maybe.
Because now this will be, I think, this 3rd one that has 4th one that has counters. You have.
Oh, there's more than this one.
There's more than that. Okay, there's a couple of agendas with counters, and I'm curious if the runner's going to have stuff that. Play an event, do something, take away a counter from an agenda card.
That would make this even worse.
I know.
But it's interesting because the archetype right now for HP is fast advance. It's what they're very, very good at, and this just does not fit in that archetype whatsoever.
HP can also do Fortress. They can to build huge walls of ice to get past.
But
or they can just play with 30 cards in their hand and score out of hand.
Exactly. So I think it's a future card. I'm hoping we'll see something down the line, or as Damon once said, we have to print bad cards to make the good cards look good. So.
Okay, next one is an ice barrier, next silver. It says next silver gains end of the runs for each res piece of next ice. It's a strength 1, cost 3, HP. I like it. It's a cheap barrier, and it's just going to get more and more taxing the more next ice you have. The strength is low, but it's the subroutines that makes it very taxing. Whenever you look at a icebreaker, an ice, it's all about the subroutines. The more subroutines it has, the more expensive it is to break each time they run, unless you get hit by Fem. What do you think?
So next silver is interesting. This gives us a second actual titled piece of next ice because we have next bronze. But important to note, Mother Goddess, which we'll go over later, also becomes the next piece of ice. So if you're running all 3 of them in the deck, you have them all rezzed. Each one of them adds an additional subroutine to each next piece of ice.
This could have 7 end-the-run subroutines.
It could, and then with the new MBN card we'll go over a little bit later, every time you want to use an icebreaker that costs you an extra 1, now you're spending 3 credits, 4 credits to break each subroutine. It could be brutal for some people to actually pump through. Obviously it fails to Corroder, we know this. I mean, Corroder's not going to have to do anything other than click for breaking subroutines.
Yeah, but even at Corroder with
say
5 subroutines, it's 5 credits.
Yeah.
What I think is really going to be interesting about these cards, I wonder if they're going to start swinging the meta back towards the multiple breaking icebreakers. So things like Morningstar and stuff like that, where you click it once and break 3 subroutines.
Yep.
You can start seeing those coming back again, and I think that's really cool for the game.
I think so too.
I think the biggest thing this does, this also buffs Next Bronze, which came out several packs ago, which is the ice that gets +1 strength for each Next in play. So all of a sudden, that guy plus this guy plus Mother Goddess means you're going to be seeing Next Bronzes at 6 and 7 strength. This guy was 6 or 7 and their own subroutines. And every single next ice or ice that absorbs the other types from ones in play, just make these better.
And important to note, it counts itself too.
Yeah,
So the instant you res it, it gains a subroutine off itself as well.
Yeah, which is good because otherwise it would do nothing.
Yes. Alright, so next up we have Lotus Field. Lotus Field is a Jinteki piece of ice. It's 5 cost, 4 strength, it's a code gate. The strength of Lotus Field cannot be lowered, and it ends the run. This is a meta-changing ice here. This basically tells all those people running Yogg for the last 1.5 years to go away. You can't data sucker it, you can't virus counter it, Yogg doesn't eat it anymore, you have to pump Yogg up to get through it. It's a fantastic piece of ice, it's 1 influence, so every house can find room for it. And with code gates being what they are today, and a lot of them are very simple to get through with a lot of the breakers we have currently, seeing pieces of ice that can't be affected by those is fantastic because it makes you have to rebuild your breaker suite or find some other way around it, which is always good in this game as a corp. You res this when your opponent's playing a Yogg deck, which we see all the time. Yoggosaurus is very popular.
Yeah. Yoggosaurus crushes this still
It does.
because it becomes 5 strength. But that means they have to spend the $10 to be able to break through Lotus Field.
Same thing with Gordian Blade. Now you have to pump Gordian Blade even further to get through it. You can't eat it with a parasite, so you can't do the whole parasite, data sucker, recursion type stuff. Atman will be sad. It's a strange piece of strength for an Atman deck to install an Atman at.
And they
you
can't
can't
lower
lower it. So it's got a lot of interesting interactions with the current game state, which you can tell why they printed it. They wanted to cut off Yogg decks from just being what they were. So.
And I like them printing out ice that breaks kind of the rules, with the previous Century one that you cannot bypass it.
Yeah, guard.
A guard. Now you have this one, you can lower the strength. And I keep hoping that they do more of these type of ice.
And another great thing there is these silver bullet type ice cards they've been printing. They're all either neutral or low influence cost, which means that you can run them in multiple decks.
Yeah, that's usually a key. When you see a card with low like 1 specifically, it's designed to be everywhere, and this is one.
Jackson Howard.
Yeah, and it's being weird. This comes out of Jinteki. Jinteki. Everybody assumes, oh, I'm facing Jinteki. The first icebreaker I want to put is the Sentry because they have good sentries, and here they're coming out with good code gates. Which is very weird.
It also goes with their new agenda that comes out that we've seen in the draft packs that gives a bonus for playing code gates in Jinteki. It gives them all a +1 strength, which makes this even harder to get through.
Yep.
Next up we have Mutate, which is a 2-cost Jinteki operation. As an additional cost to play this operation, trash a rezzed piece of ice. And this says, reveal cards from the top of R&D until you reveal a piece of ice. Install and res that piece of ice in the same position as the ice that was trashed, ignoring all costs. Then shuffle R&D. It has a 3 influence cost. This card is interesting. It's going to let you mess up with your opponent. You can res something really cheap like a pup or even like a pop-up window if you're running it out of faction. And maybe get something as big as like a Shinobi or the unique ice that Jinteki has that I don't remember the name of.
Oh, no, in Jinteki.
Yeah. It's like...
Is it Saguri, the unique one?
It's got a funny name. However, the fact that this reveals cards off the top until you hit an ice means you're guaranteed to get a piece of ice unless you go all the way through your deck and have no more ice left. But it also means you could hit another pop-up window. This is going to be good with precognition because you can look at the top 5, and if you have a really big piece of ice in there, like say you're running Janus out of house, you put that on top, and then you play this to turn your pop-up window into a Janus. But I think one of the other things about this I don't really like is the fact that it's great that it reses it for a 2-cost, so whatever ice you hit is going to be basically a 2-cost res, but your opponent knows what it is, so you're not going to get the surprise factor out of that ice.
Yeah, we all know that a Netrunner surprise is surprise, and it takes away like oversight eye, you know, it takes away the surprise. But you train surprise for economy, so. I like it. It's a fun card. I don't see it being competitive, but somebody will come out and break it like they always do. But yeah, it's a fun ice. When you hit it and it does something good, you'll be like, oh, excited! It's the greatest play ever. And when it fails, you'll be like, man, where the hell I played this card?
I think once we start to see stuff in the corp that allows you to search your deck and possibly put on top of your deck, or do something of the nature of go and find this and put it on
A
top.
test run for a corp?
Yeah, kind of like a test run or something like that. You see this become more popular. I see this being played more out of HB than probably any other house, because they have the most expensive ice in the game. And imagine dropping this, sacking, you know, an E-line, putting a Wotan on the board. Wotan requires no surprise factor. There's no shock when you hit a Wotan because you just end the run. Now all of a sudden I can res a Wotan for 2 costs. That would be fantastically awesome.
It's 3 influence, so it tells you it's kind of strong.
Except that HB can already res Wotan for a 1 cost.
They can.
Yeah.
This is very true.
Okay.
Winner.
Now, a new ID, MBN, named Near Earth Hub Broadcast Center. It's a division. The first time you create a server, each turn, draw 1 card. It's a 15-17. This ID is amazing. I think this might be the first ID that replaces the original. Andromeda kind of did it with Gabe a little bit, but this one, the 2 recurring ice for a draw card effect it's very strong. And 17 influence, it doesn't have nothing bad at all. You don't sacrifice nothing, you know. If you're playing yellow cards, there's no reason why not to play this, unless you're running a lot of trace ice. And I don't know, it's a magnificent card. 17 influence, extra 2 will make a big difference.
So I think the trade-off here, as a guy who plays MBN probably the most out of everybody in the shop right now, I tried this out last week, and I basically took my MBN tag and bag deck, and I just replaced the agenda. I got rid of the 2 recurring credits, threw this in, and added a Taurus, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to take up the additional 2 influence slots in that deck. And it forces MBN to play in a style that they've never played before, which is to go horizontal, which MBN classically does not do. So what I started running into was, I'm going horizontal, but am I getting value out of doing, or am I just using to draw a card every turn? And if you see NBN start moving towards more asset-based cards, which they don't have a lot of yet, but they're starting to get more of, then this becomes stupidly powerful, because a lot of people aren't going to run your 3 trace asset. It's just not going to happen. They're just going to let it sit there because, whoop-de-doo, who cares, it's not worth the trash cost. So yeah, being able to play those out every turn is great. Had this been something like HB, where you have asset-based economy, it would have been fantastic. So I hope we see something for MBN going further down the line, where I can res this and get reoccurring cash off it every turn. It's good. But I did also struggle on my mid-seasons turn not having those 2 recurring credits. I had to play Transmission Dish, which we'll talk about next, and to get the recurring credits back, I needed to land that really good mid-seasons. So I think if I spent more time tuning the deck built around this, it would have some value. But if you look at the classic NBN playstyle right now, which is Tag and Bag and NBN Fast Advance, you're not going horizontal. You're going deep, and you're going to go put a Sand in, and you're going to Fast Advance out of hand. So I think it's going to take a specific deck type and more cards coming out to make this truly fantastic, but it was fun to play with the other night. So
I'm going to disagree a little bit here. I think your deck with the mid-seasons and psychographics is a perfect case for where this is not the be-all, end-all. You do much better with the 2 recurring credits. I have a deck built with this right now that has 0 traces in the deck. It's Fast Advance, it runs the Astro Train, it doesn't run many installed cards. But whereas 2 recurring credits would do literally nothing for my deck, having 2 extra influence and drawing a card when I drop my Sam, when I drop my Jackson Howard, means I'm getting a benefit. So
yeah, definitely.
I think it splits MBN up a little bit further. When you see this card, you're probably not going to see a Tag and Bag deck. And now when you see Making News, the original core MBN, you're going to think, okay, they're doing traces, they could be Fast Advance, they could be Tag and Bag, or they haven't bought Upstalk yet.
Yep.
Because if you're not running traces, there's literally no reason not to use this card.
There was 2 influence, yeah.
And I think the trade-off between this one and The World Is Yours, which is the 40-12, where you have an extra card in hand, or you can have an extra card in hand. I think, again, this is just so much better, even though you've got to run 5 extra cards.
Mm-hmm. Totally agreed. All right, so next up we have a primary transmission dish. This is a new MBN asset. It's a 2 cost to res, 3 cost to trash. It is a beanstalk asset, which will be interesting to see if we get anything that actually start affecting beanstalk items, because it is a different part of the game, so maybe we'll see some things that only specifically target moon-based resources or whatever.
I just want to say it cracks me up to see beanstalk cards.
It's 3 recurring credits, and you can use these credits during traces, and it's 2 influence. Like I said, I was playing with this the other night. You get 3 of them in play, and it's stupidly awesome. Mid-seasons as alone is a fantastic card. We all know this. Being able to land a trace 5 for 5 credits, and every one of them is a tag. Now you get some of these in play, and now your mid-seasons just get ridiculous. And you could start to see decks, I think, where you run 3 of these, you get them all installed, you res them on your mid-seasons turn, you land enough tags that you can Cypher graphics out a single, project be able to win the game right off the bat. And I think there's something to be said about a deck type that might revolve around that. But even more importantly is MBN getting assets now is really interesting because, again, how often are you going to run and trash this as the runner? Not fairly often, I would imagine, unless you knew your opponent was doing something really janky with it that was going to really make your day sad. You see a lot of people in our current game state anyways where they ignore installed assets a lot of times. Like, how many times have we seen medical research, stations from MBN? They just get ignored, and they actually provide credits, and runners still ignore them. I agree, but it is the current state of the game that we play in here in Florida right now.
I've ended a lot of games with 3 of those in play.
Exactly.
Unprotected.
So, as we start to see more and more trace items, both in MBN and other factions, and I especially think this fits in well with other factions too that have trace that do brutal things, but they usually struggle to get enough reoccurring credits maybe to use for that, which is where the real benefit of traces come from. You'll see this splashed out of house, but I enjoyed using it the other day. Being able to make all of my trace ice even better is just great, especially when I res it for 2 and it instantly pays for itself if I'm using it on trace. And it can be a surprise too, right? So there is the paid window, so they encounter the ice before you fire the subroutine, you res this, and now you've got your 3 recurring credits. And now it's like, okay, well that trace 3 that you thought it was going to be is now going to be a 6. And now you thought you were going to be able to get through it, and now you can't. So it's going to be cool. I hope MBN continues to get more tracing ice. I think it's a fantastic idea for that faction. And the more we get, the better these become. So.
My main comment on this, I think it's fantastic. If you res it and don't do anything with it, and the runner runs and trashes it, you're actually coming out ahead because they've spent a total of 3 credits in a click, where you've only spent 2 credits in a click. This card is what Netplay should have been. Like from the core, this is just 100% better, like in every possible way, I believe, than Netplay's.
And again, it works well with your Earth Hub. It's an asset, so you install it, create a new server, you draw your card, and then, if you gave up those recurring trace credits, but you actually do need them for something in the deck, now you've got 3,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it fits perfectly with the new agenda because I don't see a reason to protect this.
No, if they want to spend a click and $3 to blow it up.
If you res it and you manage to use those recurring credits, you're ahead if the runner goes and trash it. Unless you're playing against Wizard and this will just go.
But hey, if Wizard's running that and trashing it, it's something else that he's not running. So
True.
That was
me. Midway Station Grid is a 4-cost NBN upgrade. It's a beanstalk and a region. So it's got the limit 1 region per server text. The runner must spend an additional credit as an additional cost each time he or she uses an icebreaker to break at least 1 subroutine during a run on this server. It costs 4 to trash it, and it costs 4 influence. Holy crap. Every time they want to break every time they spend $1 for a break a subroutine, they spend an extra $1. This makes every single breaker short of Yogg and Morningstar super, super inefficient. All of a sudden, it's taking Corroder, let's see, Corroder up against like Wall of Static, all of a sudden takes 3 instead of 2. Okay, that's not a huge difference, but when you go against things like Hive, all of a sudden Hive is going to cost Corroder 11, 12, 13 credits to get through. That's absurd. Ideally, they only make, like, if I'm running against this thing and it's and I know it's what's there, I'm going to have a lot of money because I'm going to break this on the first run. I want this thing gone as soon as I can. And if it's the unpleasant surprise behind or like something that trashes programs like a roto turret, I'm in trouble.
It's probably the best corp card in the pack in my opinion. Like I said, I used this on Thursday, or last week rather on Tuesday when it came out in my MBN deck, and Jared ran into it and it just made his life a living hell. You look at it and a lot of people misread the card when it first was printed and they just thought, oh, so I use my breaker and it costs me 1 extra credit, who cares? It's incorrect. You actually have to use that breaker each instance for each subroutine. So then all of a sudden this becomes fantastic. And you think about a lot of the cards we're starting to see that have multiple subroutines on them. We got Shinobi recently, which I believe is it's got the 4 traces and each one does a net damage out of Jinteki.
It's three, but it does, it's a trace 1, 2, and then 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you start seeing things like that in Hive, like you mentioned, and now all of a sudden breaking those is so expensive. I mean, you can see things like Muckraker come back, Woodcutter, anything that has a lot of subroutines on it that actually have some downside if those subroutines firing. Yeah, Next Ice.
Next Ice.
Next Ice is another good example. The Grail Ice that we're going to talk about here shortly is the same way. They all get lots of subroutines on them. This is fantastic. And again, it's that surprise factor that they don't even know it's there. Yeah, you installed a region or you installed an asset or an upgrade in the base of that server. They don't know what it is, and all of a sudden they faceplant into something that's like, oh, I can easily get through this. No, you can't.
And the worst thing that happens to them is if you install this and they think it's an agenda and they money up and make a run at it, and you res it, because they can even know what ice is out ahead of it, you're probably doubling or close to doubling what they need to get through that. If they make that run and this is the only thing at the end, they've kind of wasted a run.
Yeah, this is great for I need exactly this amount to break the server to steal that ice. You install this, an NPD contract, odds are after they're done through that whole thing, they're not have the money to take away NPD contract. Very, very, very strong card. And it's very strong.
And it makes Yogg sad because Yogg's not free anymore.
Yep.
Yep.
Anything that makes Yogg sad makes me happy.
We've seen cards in this pack already, and we've seen spoiled cards coming up in the cycle and also in the draft packs that are really trying to force the game away from those cheap, efficient breakers now.
Or at least making them, and not to force away from them, but it makes them more of a risk to play. And I like that when those aren't the sure thing, guaranteed,
Yes.
Best possible thing you can.
We always wondered, are they ever going to make better breakers than the ones that came in the core set? And definitely they're not going to make them better, but they're just going to make them a choice. Now with cards like this, do you really want to break just a breaker that only breaks one subroutine, or a breaker that breaks multiple subroutines?
This actually makes Morningstar
Fantastic.
awesome.
Yeah.
Important to note too, it's not Fem isn't affected by it. It can still do its bypass.
Yeah,
It's not being used to break.
So we have here Root. It's unique. Asset, Beanstalk, 3 recurring credits. Use these credits to advance, install, and res cards. It's a whaling card, 3 influence, 4 to trash. This now is the second one, like the previous one, the primary transmission dish, that has 3 recurring credits. I'm curious to see if every corp is going to get one. I like it. This was kind of expensive though. 6 is a lot because compared to the primary transmission dish, in which like Tree was saying, if you install it and the runner trashes it, you're ahead. This one you will be in the hole. But the big advantage of this is that the 3 recurring credits can be used for a lot of things. Advancing, installing. Here you have a deep server. You can install them. Use the credits off of here. Res cards. It's good. I don't see if it goes see its play. 6 is a lot, unless you go protected.
So what I like about this is I've been experimenting with this in my personal time, and I haven't actually brought it to the store yet, but I've been trying to work on a version of a corp deck that runs very, very little cash. And the reason why is things like account siphon and stuff like that are so prevalent right now that actually having an account siphon landed on you as the corp these days isn't so bad. It's the economy it gives the runner that's worse about it. And so looking at decks now, I've been trying to come up with a deck that can use a lot less dollars to do what it wants to do. So it can deny those account siphons to the corp or to the runner, or if you do land them, you're only getting $2 and who cares at that point. And this is where something like this is fantastic. You res this when they're trying to do the account siphon, so you drop all your credits, and now I might be poor, but I can still score points. I can still win the game with this resident installed. And again, is the runner going to run and trash this? I think in a deck that was built around abusing this card, yeah, they'll eventually realize what it's meant for. But this is something you install and you protect the hell out of, and if they do want to go trash it, tax it and get it done. But if you can build a deck that wants to be poor and then use the recurring credits like these, had it not said you could advance with it, it would be nowhere near as good. But the fact that you can advance with this is fantastic. And then the fact you can even install with it. How many times are you playing any faction, Wayland or HB specifically, that goes really deep on their servers, and now you're paying extra credits every time you install a piece of ice? Well, now you don't have to.
Yeah.
Now you're not losing that money. And even to be able to screw with the math of the runner, thinking, okay, I'm going to run, how many credits does he have in his house card? Oh, he's only got 3, so it's going to be really hard for the res ice. Totally forgetting you have this res asset over here that has 3 more recurring on it that can be used to res ice. I think it's a really great card. I think you're going to have to build a deck around using it, but I think the decks that do take advantage of it are going to be very, very tough to play against.
And one thing is the credits is not for in that server. It's anywhere. So
I think you can go ultra rich with this and install this in an off-the-grid server, and and as long as you protect your HQ, you have an untouchable. You spent $12 for it, so it should be your submarine full of money. At that point.
Yes.
Also important to note, this card is unique. You can't have 3 of them in play,
Yeah.
which is the first thing I thought of. I was like, ooh, I could have 3. Nope, just 1.
Yeah, 3 would have been kind of silly.
Well, 3 would have been $18. So the first one would cost 6, the second one would cost 3, the third one would be free.
Exactly.
If you spent 3 turns of just installing them.
All right, next up we have Taurus, and this is a very interesting piece of ice. This is a Wayland ice. It's 5 cost, 5 strength, which is very cool. It's a sentry, it's a tracer, it's 2 influence, and it reads as follows. Trace 2, if successful, trash 1 piece of hardware. If your trace strength is 5 or greater, trash 1 piece of hardware. This card has been very confusing for a lot of people on the forums recently. And I'm hoping the way I've finally gotten it understood in my mind is actually the correct way, so if you've heard something different, please make sure you correct me.
Maybe we should have talked about this first.
It's alright. Hey, that's what these are for, right?
That's right.
So I
Live,
understand
unedited.
as long as the runner does not break the subroutine, and it actually is allowed to fire. The first part of this is simply, if you land the trace 2, which you can adjust however you want, they trash a piece of hardware. But even if you don't land the trace 2, but as long as the subroutine's been allowed to fire and you pumped it higher than 5 or 5 or greater, you will trash a piece of hardware whether they beat the trace or not.
That's correct.
And this is absolutely brutal. I played this last Tuesday in my tag and bag deck. Dude had 2 Plascretes installed. Not anymore. Sorry.
It trashes.
You're not sorry, you're happy.
I mean, the ability to targetly kill hardware now is absolutely fantastic. It's a 5 strength piece of ice, which means you're not going to break it for cheap. And now all of a sudden you have to beat this trace, which, as we've just seen, we now have an asset that gives you an extra 3 recurring credits for everyone you have res to use in this. This is absolutely amazing for 2 influence. Every deck is going to want that has a problem with hardware being in play is going to want to run these. Your console, buy. You're playing Dinosaurus, not anymore.
And they lose breaker.
And they lose whatever's installed on it. I mean, I can't have enough good things to say about this card. It's finally time that the Corp got a way to target and kill hardware, because hardware's been sitting around for way too long being fairly safe. Even decks that I've built and abused hardware out of, where I was using the Overminds, and I just wanted a ton of memory in play. Trashing that memory is fantastic. Kate decks that run 5, 6, 7 breakers because they have all these mem chips in play. Trash those mem chips, and all of a sudden they lose all their programs. It's nice that we finally have something that does this. I was waiting for the ability for us to do so.
If they can't break this, if they cannot break that subroutine, and you put this on R&D, their R&D interfaces just go away, and all of a sudden they're back to digging for a single card.
Exactly.
And that's awesome.
I think the other reason we saw this card come out is we know for a fact we're seeing hardware tutor coming up for the runners. So I think it was important that now we have a way to target and kill hardware as well.
And you can no longer, criminals can't just install Desperado, run naked. Now if they do that, you res this, you're like, bye-bye, Desperado. It's amazing.
And how fantastic is this artwork? I mean, FFG does an amazing job with artwork, but I would love to see a playmat for one of the lead kits come out with this on. I mean, if you didn't notice, the constellation is actually inside the bowl.
I had not realized that. That's pretty
I
awesome.
mean,
Oh,
the
I
things
didn't
they
see
do
that
with
either.
the artwork in this game. Like, some cards are kind of so-so, but you get artwork like this and like the root, and it's just amazing, And it's so Wayland. It is so very much Wayland for what this card does too, which I just think is fantastic.
It felt like a Grim for hardware, and I loved Grim. I like this card. Note that as the Corp, it's not free to trash that hardware. You're going to be spending at least $3, some of which will be hopefully recurring credits.
Yep.
But even then, once you res this, it's probably worth the $8 just to trash a piece of hardware. Like a targeted piece of hardware of your choice, it's going to be good.
And that's what it is what makes it very good is that you as the corp, you're picking which hardware. It's not the runner picking which hardware, which is the other hardware trashes we have.
And it's about time we also saw more punishing traces. I can't tell you how many games I play in where a lot of people will just let traces fire because a lot of traces in the past have not been that bad. Oh, I take a tag, I'll just drop it, whatever. But now, you have to beat this trace because it's bad enough you're losing one anyways. Are you really going to want to lose two? You know?
Actually, if I only have one piece of hardware in that, I don't
True.
beat that trace.
Exactly.
I have to break that subroutine is what I have to do.
Exactly.
That's the best answer, guys. Just break the subroutine,
Yes.
don't let the ice do its thing.
Yeah.
Up next we have Mother Goddess. This is a unique piece of ice. It is mythic. It doesn't have any other subtypes yet, just mythic. It's 4 cost to res, it has 4 strength, it has a subroutine that says end the run, and has the text, Mother Goddess gains the subtypes of all other resed ice. This card is pretty darn cool. You can use it to your advantage by playing next ice, but it does get weaker as the game goes on. As you play and res more and more ice, it gains more and more subtypes and is more and more breakable. You could play it in was it HB Stronger Together with Bioroids to get a +1 strength. But I think again, this is going to be an early game piece of ice. This feels a lot like it actually is exactly like Bastion if you res it alone. Actually, it's better than Bastion if you res it alone. If you have a barrier raised, it is Bastion. So I think it's an early game ice that you'll probably want to replace by the time the corp is the runner is starting to get their breaker suite out. I feel it very similar to Rainbow.
Rainbow. That's
in that
exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah, it's an early game thing. Would you like to answer your phone?
Nah, don't worry about
Well, would you like to wait so you don't have to edit it out in the video?
it. Yeah, sure.
Are they gonna pick that up on the mic or?
Yeah, well,
So just pop out this segment.
Come on, Angela, dance party. Dancing for YouTube. This is going up in the credits, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where's the roof?
yeah.
And we're back.
And we're back.
Cut.
And like Tree said, I see it as a rainbow. As a rainbow that early on is magnificent, and later on it becomes rainbow.
So
And
this
it's
is
taxing, you know.
This is an ice that for the rest of the game, that the history of Netrunner will continually get better. As we continue to see ice that's printed that is benefited by having other ice of that subtype res, this card will never go out of style. This will always benefit those decks because as we've seen with like Next, it counts as a next piece of ice, which means all of them now have another card they trigger off of. I think that's really important for the game. As you said, first turn you res this, the runner's like, I can't do anything about it unless I have an AI breaker. One of the things I'd like to touch on, and a lot of people have probably missed this, is I think this pack, more than a lot of the packs we've seen in the past, if you actually read the fluff text, has done fantastic jobs of advancing the storyline of Netrunner.
I haven't read them.
If you look at the root, for example, which we've kind of already skipped over, but if you go back and read the fluff text on it and why the beanstalk was built, is amazing.
It is fantastic.
Read this, and it's like a religious synopsis of how the net was created, if you read the fluff text on it. And that's really cool. I like the fluff behind the game and the story of the world a lot. And they've done a fantastic job with these recent sets of cards of actually telling that story.
And it's nice that they put the story within the cards, and so you don't have a little pamphlet that you have to read. Each card gives you a part of the story.
Yep.
Any
Your
other
turn.
things? My turn. Galahad, 2 to res, strength 1, ice, burial, grail. When the runner encounters Galahad, you may reveal up to 2 grail ice from each queue. For the remainder of this run, Galahad gains the subroutines of the revealed ice in the order of your choice. End the run. And the flavor text. He who bears the shield of honor.
It's also one influence, don't forget.
Yeah, and it's 1 influence.
Oh, it has an influence.
Yes,
I
it
haven't
does.
caught that.
And it's a neutral card. This one is the first one we have had.
Yep.
I think it's the first one. It's not the first one we've seen, but
Yeah, it's the first that we have access of the Grail Ice. Grail Ice is an awesome design, I think. Each of the Grail Ice adds a different subroutine. You have end the run, net damage. What's the other one?
there's one that says you cannot make any further runs this turn. Then the damage one is 2 net damage.
It's 2 net damage. And each one adds to the other ones by revealing them. it's a good mechanic. I like it a lot, and then the more you show, the more taxing they're going to be. Again, because they add subroutines to the ice, and this with that the upgrade region again makes it better. It's a good ice. I like it.
So my only concern is you're gonna have to build a deck around it.
Yeah, you have to bid. Yes.
You're always gonna be keeping at least 2 pieces of Grail Ice in your hand for the entire game.
But it happens.
Which it might as well read then your hand size is reduced to 3 cards.
No, but it's, a lot of times, like mid game, the corp has ice in their hand all the time. So
Again, it's gonna take a specific deck to abuse it. I think you're gonna see a lot of decks like even MBN. Going back to the have 6 cards in your hand, I think this slots in really cool for that kind of deck play. HB playing,
CI.
Yeah, playing CI. I can maybe I'm running fast advance, but the one problem that fast advance has always had is I don't want to res expensive ice. So now you res this for 2, and I have all these other grails in my hand. Now I can give it multiple subroutines and do bad things.
2 more end the runs too. You can make it so they can't run anymore. Making the runner not be able to run anymore. I know that's not this card, but I think that one's going to be very powerful.
and even you could even show another Galahad. So
add extra end the runs.
and that would add another extra ones.
But yeah, so it's going to take a very specific deck built around it though, because the worst thing possibly is have this installed and have no other grails in your hand. That's just
at that point you spend an extra $1 for Ice Wall, and that's not horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, you spend your influence on it, which is kind of bad.
Is the issue.
So right now this card is currently not something I will be playing, but when the rest of the Grail Ice comes out, I'm hoping there's like 1 per pack for the rest of the cycle. I think you'll start seeing those. I don't know. I'd be curious to find out if all of them have an influence cost.
Yeah.
If so, that's going to get pricey quick, unless they're all 1s, and even then, still.
And the other option is too, I want to see if each faction will get one that's specific to them, which I think would be really cool.
All the ones they've shown have been neutral so far. So I'm going to go back and look at my draft pack and see if they have influence costs or not.
Yep.
But when you're drafting, you don't care about that, so you don't look at that.
It's true.
All right, so the last card in the corp side is Bad Times. This is a neutral 4-cost operation. It's a gray ops. They'll play it only if the runner is tagged. The runner's memory limit is reduced by 2 until the end of the turn. Again, I played this last Tuesday, and I trashed 2 programs with it. So when this first came out, I misunderstood the way memory worked. It's not something we've ever really had to deal with in the game state. So as you see these new cards come out, I was under the impression that the moment their memory drops, it doesn't matter until their turn goes to a point. And I was wrong. The moment your memory drops, you must fulfill your memory requirement. So that's what makes this so damn good. When this first came out, I was like, this is horrible. Why do I care as the runner if you do this to me? Now I understand why. Because now I'm reducing your memory limit, and you have to immediately uninstall if you're over that memory limit. This gives more options for Tag and Bag. I'm happy to see Tag and Bag moving away from just using Scorch as an option for the deck. We've said for a very long time that tags need to be more punishing in the game because as it stands now, tags are probably not as powerful as they maybe should be, only because Scorch exists do people think that tags are bad right now. And this instantly says tags are even more bad right now because
2 of these says you have no memory. Trash you're in everything you have.
Yeah,
Trash all your programs. That's huge.
It is. It very much is. So I think you're going to see at least this as a one-of in a lot of corp decks that are running even some type of tagging, and even more so with the prevalence of the count siphon right now. Are you really going to count siphon and not clear those tags at the end of your turn like a lot of people do, including myself in my current deck? Tag me all of a sudden gets scarier with this in play because, just wham! Now you have 2 less memory. Trash.
And I think again, it's like 1 of these is scary, 2 of these is crippling to a runner because all of a sudden they've played out their full breaker suite, and you say, oh, you've got some tags from account siphoning me last turn. You managed to get up to $8. Okay, so after account siphon that might be tough. But a few turns later, they draw bad times, trash your breakers. Everything you've got in play, trash. All of your programs, trash them. Could get rid of a magnum opus, so you're trashing their economy at that point too.
And you could actually build a deck around this because there are ways to go tutor for cards right now as the core. So you tutor for 2 of these, and then you run anything that allows you to just tag the runner. And let's be fair, there's a lot of ways to tag the runner right now that really don't require the runner to really do much of anything at all. And so now it's like, I can tag you. I've got 2 of these now in my hand. Are you really going to even install programs? It's one of those cards that's going to change the way that runners have to pay attention to tags now. And I think the days of floating tags are gone. We know that. We have a runner card coming up that just drops all of your tags, which, depending on how you look at it, maybe you agree it should be in the game, maybe you shouldn't, but that's beside the point. This
We'll get there
is
in a few
fantastic. Yes, this is a fantastic card. I like that it's a gray op because as we've started to see already that there's cards that are coming that are going to interact with the versions of operations played.
Yep.
So the fact it's on a black op is really cool and that it's a gray op. So I'm interested to see how those things continue to play over time. But very, very good. I think you're going to see it ran a lot now. Tag me decks are really, because again, they're going to have to really pay attention. So.
No, and what Angela says, I like it. It's not always tag burn. Turn burn is the only, and close accounts, but this is like the card says, it's bad times. You know, I don't know if your face is going to be like that as the runner, being so sad, but
I've made that face before.
you made that face before.
That face usually comes from a roto turret or an archer.
But great art. I love the title.
It's fantastic.
The fluff is also, again, is funny. Very good card.
Alright, so now we're going to kick over to the runner.
Yep.
I shuffled my crap.
You shouldn't do that. We have Cyber Threat.
Okay.
Cyber Threat is a one-cost Anarch event. It is a priority event, which I believe is the keyword they're using for these events that have the text "play only as your first click."
Yep.
So if you're playing this card, it's got to be the first thing you do on your turn. Choose a server. The corp can res a piece of ice protecting that server. If he or she does not, make a run on that server during which the corp cannot res ice. Wow. This is amazing on turn 1 after the corp has installed on R&D and has installed on HQ. Because you tell them, okay, I spent $1. I choose HQ. Either res your piece of ice there, or I can make runs. I can make a run against it immediately without you being able to res ice. So either they res it and you say, okay, I'm gonna run on R&D now. Now that you presumably don't have enough money to res that piece of ice, or you get a free run against HQ or whichever server. You can do it the other way around. I think it's going to be really strong, forcing them to show you what is on servers. If they install what could be an agenda behind a piece of ice, you can throw Cyber Threat at it. If they don't res it, you get a free run, and you get in there to whatever is in that server. If they do res it, you can then have the option to go and do special order or test run or whatever it is to get the appropriate breaker to be able to get through. Very strong.
It's the same as the criminal one. The one that res it or trash it.
Well, Forged you have to trash.
I know,
Yeah.
but this is Anarch's version of that card.
It is.
It's
very
cheaper, and it basically does the same thing. But if they don't res it, instead of trashing it, you get a free run out of it. So you
Which
get
is a free run during which they can't res any ice.
yes.
That's huge.
So this slots into 2 very specific decks in my mind. My Anarch credit denial deck that I've been playing a lot recently that I've done well with. It's a fantastic another card that says you have something installed over there. I maybe want to see what's in the root of that server. I maybe don't care, but I'm going to force you to either res it or I'm going to run it and find out what it is anyways. So there's that option, which I'm cool with because I want you to be broke. So, sure, res it to protect whatever that is over there that I don't know what it is. And 2, it works, I think, well with Silhouette actually. Being able to expose a very expensive piece of ice, like on the previous run, so the last turn you run, you expose that, oh, it's a Wotan. There's no way he has enough money to res that ice. So now you go, okay, well I want to run there, res that. Oh, you can't? No, I get a free run on your server. And it's cool because it makes the run too for you, so you're not losing a click to run as well, which I think is just great.
I like it. Like I said, it's a good card.
Yep. It's kind of like the bad publicity one, where if you have a bad pub, blackmail.
Yeah, blackmail.
Which is arguably more brutal, but it kind of gives you the same effect, If you can deny them credits and then play this, you're basically getting a free one where they can't res any ice. Also, even if you know for a fact the furthest piece of ice is something that there's just 1 credit out of their cost to afford, but the rest they could possibly res, it could be an ice wall or a pop-up window. Now they can't res anything.
Here's the thing though. They can choose to res that pop-up window. It doesn't specifically say that it has to be the first piece of ice on there. They can res any ice in the server.
Oh, true, yeah,
So-
I guess it is a piece of ice protecting that server.
So pop-up
yeah.
window makes this sad.
Yeah.
So do really cheap ice, but
I missed the part where it was
Yeah.
you actually have to target the server, not the piece of ice,
Yeah.
so yeah.
That's me.
yep.
Okay, Lamprey.
Lamprey.
1 cost, 1 memory, no strength. It's a program virus. Whenever you make a successful run on HQ, the corp loses 1 credit. Trash Lamprey if the corp purges ice virus counters. It's good. It's a 1-cost virus. It is good for noise, in which we've been seeing noise coming and doing a comeback. It's promoting the corp to purge. You know, I see it stronger and outside of criminal. Anarch, sorry, for criminals. Anarch, because the least amount of counter type of viruses you have installed, the stronger this card is. In the sense of, will the corp want to purge just to destroy one card? If you're playing with Anarchs and you have parasites, you have medium, you have all this stuff, the corp says, sure, I'll purge, I'm taking rid of a lot of cards, dealing with a lot of cards. But by itself, for criminal, for noise, play it, trash a card, and has a cool effect on it, I think it's good.
So my problem with this is it doesn't fit at least my playstyle or the playstyle that I've seen recently in the game. For noise, Virus Spotter, it's fantastic. I really feel like, honestly, if I play this card, it's in a noise deck, where I just need a crap ton of viruses to force you to mill cards. Problem is,
cheap ones too.
Yeah, and cheap ones. The problem is in the current game state, running players' hands is not the most optimal way for playing the game, as we've seen. R&D dig is how you win right now. And is that right? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's time for the game state to kind of shift. But the problem is, I'm costing the corp $1 after I break all their ice in front of their hand and accessing 1 card out of 5, which may or may not even be an agenda. So I think you need a deck that's going to want to run hands consistently and have a win condition built around running the hand, which arguably Criminal is probably the one faction that has the most cards to be able to do so. But even Criminal players these days, I'm seeing just drop R&D interfaces and run R&D, or they're getting into your remotes and stealing your agendas out of there directly. Now,
to beat Fast Advance, you have to run their hand.
Or you have to R&D lock them.
Or R&D locking. It's 2. And this with Gabe, I get 2 credits and you lose 1.
Yeah. And as you know, there's a virus that's been spoiled that's coming up that every time the corp loses at least 1 credit from, you gain 1 back. Yeah. And it's the same thing, it's a click to trash, or purge and you trash them all. But I really feel like this is virus fodder for noise right now, is what it is.
Yeah. If this had been 0 memory, I probably would put it into slot in some decks. Just, if nothing else, if you put one of these out there and you start making R&D runs, eventually they're going to get annoyed with losing their credits, and they'll purge virus counters, which, unless they're that rare player running Cyberdex trials, it's costing them an entire turn.
It is, but where does the math break even, though, for the runner with this card is the problem.
How
many subs do I have to break to be able to make you lose $1?
And it's eating MU. Eating
Yeah.
MU is, and since it's, I guess you could install it on a Jin if you wanted to.
That's what I'm saying. Anarchs have a lot of ways to Jin, Sashaharaja, whatever the name of that other one that you get a credit each time you.
That one doesn't help that MU problem at all.
Doesn't it store? I thought you hosted on it.
No, it's you can host whatever you want on it, but it doesn't. Jin and Leprechaun, which comes up later, still say cards that are hosted on them do not count against MU.
Okay.
Whereas like Parasite, which has a 1 memory cost, still costs you that point of memory when it's installed on.
But you know, in a noise deck, you play Shahrazad or whatever, and you install this, you gain your buck from Shahrazad, and then you trash it after you build a card and you install another.
Oh no,
it's virus like.
I think it's fantastic for noise. I don't think it makes any of my other decks right now.
Maybe with a sneak door, but again, they just have to drop 1 piece of ice on archives, and now all of a sudden you're spending more credits than you're costing them is the problem.
And between this and Sneak Door, you've spent 3 of your 4 MU, which means any icebreaker or any ice is going to stop you.
All right, now it's time for Angelo's ranting segment.
Angelo's favorite cards, yay!
Paper tripping. This is a 4-cost criminal event with 2 influence. It's a priority event. Play only as your first click. Remove all tags. I really don't feel like this has a place in the game. I'll start with saying that, but this is interesting.
Disagree.
You disagree.
Angelo doesn't like cards that are bad for you.
No, it's not that. I think tags right now are an important part of the gameplay for a lot of corp decks in general. Not just tag and bag, but there's a lot of cards out there that allow the only way for the corp to interact with the runner outside of ice is by tagging the runner and doing something with it. And now all of a sudden you're telling me that I can land tags on them and all it costs them is 5 credits essentially to purge X number of tags. Whereas it costs to be an exorbitant amount of credits generally to land each one of those tags on the runner. And that's where I start to run into an issue. This is basically in the game as an anti-mid-seasons card. I mean, it's really what it is. You're not going to use this to drop 2 tags. You're not going to use it to drop 1 tag. You're going to use this if a player's playing mid-seasons, and that's cool. I get that. But we're starting to see more and more tags, though, including being given out, especially via ice, especially via account siphon and stuff like that, where having a card in the game that just instantly basically says, spend 5 credits and drop all of these, it breaks even at, what, 3 tags basically, you're breaking even with this? So, because 2 credits and a click for each tag, so, yeah.
2 tags.
2 tags, yeah, 2 tags, you're breaking even.
So actually, no, at that point you're getting a click, so.
Yeah.
That's,
It's a meta call, I think, more than anything else. It's just like Cyberdex Trials, maybe it'll never be played. Maybe it will be played, because I mean, honestly, tags are more brutal than, virus tokens tend to be, and we all thought Cyberdex Trials was going to be one of those cards that was going to break the game, and nobody ever plays it. The general consensus of the network community was that it shouldn't have existed, just like this. And, my opinion will probably change about this, but right off my first blush pass on this was, I don't like anything in the game that gives you such a powerful effect for such a minimal amount of having to do things, especially when there's already a way to get around that gameplay mechanic anyways, which is built into the game naturally, so.
Alright, I will play a counterpoint here.
Me too.
I do agree with some of what you said, but I think you glossed over a very important thing about this card. This card is a priority event. If it is not played you cannot play it unless it's the first click of your turn. This means you can't do account siphon, paper tripping,
True.
Edict Court. So I think that's a really good design decision they made here. Basically, this card can counter your mid-season replacements if you put no extra money into it. So you play mid-seasons for 5 and give me 5 tags, assuming I don't spend anything into the trace. On my next turn, if I have this in hand, because I can't draw and then play it, I have to have this in my hand to say, paper tripping, remove all my tags, it costs me 5 as well.
That's true. I mean, I will admit the priority part of it does make it a slightly bit more balanced, in my opinion.
Also, you get 2 clicks after you play that mid-seasons to scorch me, to accounts or to bad times, to close my account, so that I now have to spend 4 clicks, presumably 4 clicks, getting the money to play this on my following turn.
This is true.
I think I don't think this kills mid-seasons. I think this is a great silver bullet that if you happen to have it in hand when your opponent mid-seasons, you know what? If I'm playing against a deck that I know has mid-seasons because I've seen it through an HQ run, or just because I know what you're playing because we play 1,000,000 times a week, I probably don't make the run on your bait agenda until I have one of these in hand and I have $4, and maybe even I have a hope that you don't have closed accounts. Because again, closed accounts after a mid-seasons just shuts this card down.
It does. It very much does.
If this card had been 0, it would have been ridiculous.
Yeah,
at
true.
4 costs, I think it's very fair. And it's dead against so many other decks.
It is also very criminally. I will admit this. It's a fantastic card to have out of criminal. It's what you would expect to see. So,
I like it just because I think for a healthy game, you need a counter for everything. You cannot have no basis or facet of the game to go rampant. Like, how imagine playing this game without Plascreek? It would have been crazy. Everybody would have been scorching. And this, it just gives the runner a choice, okay? So now the choice for the runner is, do I want to eat a card slot in my deck for the chance of me encountering a mid-season deck? Because if I'm not encountering a mid-season deck, like I said, unless I do 2 count siphons back to back, then make this efficient, because if not, I will play the other one, the drop 2 tags, draw 2 cards, instead of this one, if that's a better card than this. But now I'm eating a card space, 2 influence, if I'm running it out of faction, for the chance of me seeing mid-season. Now you're looking at 3 of this, and then 2 or 3 Plascreeks. Now you're looking at 4 to 6 cards in my deck, hoping for a matchup. And if not, it's the first card we'll be trashing. You know what I'm saying?
And against a lot of tag and bag decks, a tag and bag that's not MBN, this doesn't do anything because they do C-Source and Scorch it twice and shake your hand.
Yep. So I think it's good.
it will shut down Psycho decks. Psycho decks do get shut down.
It means you may have to do mid-seasons twice again.
Yeah.
Which means you got to be making money. Which means it makes that matchup's going to be tougher for them if your opponent's running paper tripping.
But can't you?
But you don't see many decks.
I doubt you will see.
You could mid-season and then Psycho right after it.
Oh yeah,
You can.
It just you can't now.
Yeah.
You just can't do that and hope to draw psychographics later on.
You'd have to be a bit more set up and prepared and be fairly rich to be able to do 5 for the mid-seasons, plus if you want to do, was it the $13 to win instantly with Project Veil?
And let's remember, mid-seasons also requires them to have stolen an agenda the previous turn, so it has a very specific timing window. So that's why I see a lot of decks, they mid-seasons as soon as they can to land the tags, and then it's, okay, now I hope I have what I need the next turn or the turn after to actually use those tags effectively.
Alright, I got an easy card. Power Tap. It's a criminal resource. 2 costs to install it, 1 influence, which is cool. Gain a buck whenever a trace is initiated. At first glance, this looks to me like a +1 link card, but it's actually better than that. If you're running Tag Me, if you don't care about your tags because you intend to paper trip at some point, or if you're running Plascrete, this means that every time you run through any ice that has a trace, you get a buck. Hit a Data Raven, get a tag, get a buck. Lots of other ice, the trace ice that doesn't end the run is going to get you free money that you can use either later on into your run, to break other pieces of ice or to steal an NAPD contract. And if the Corp is running mid-seasons and you don't care, you get a buck when they play their mid-seasons. I don't think this sees play in too many of my decks just because it relies too much on the Corp. The runner doesn't do anything that initiates traces, so you cannot natively abuse this with just your deck. You have to have a Corp that is playing the right cards so you get the money out of this, and I think there's better ways to spend your $2.
I haven't spent a lot of time in Criminal since the game's been out, but Criminal has historically always been the Tag Me faction. The faction that does not care about floating tags. And all of a sudden, in the most recent packs, we've seen this big push now, including an Honor and Profit, towards run tons of resources as a Criminal. I just don't get that for the faction. It's really weird. And this is another one of those things where I look at this and I go, I can sell it to Aesop's Pawn Shop and make some bucks off it, but that's about it. It just doesn't seem like it does a lot for me if I was playing Criminal, unless you're running against a very specific deck type that's running enough traces that you make value out of it.
If you have 3, you want to run through. If you have 3 of these in play because it's not unique, you want to run through every trace you can. Like Data Raven gets you $3 every run. That's awesome.
And 3 tags and 3 power counters. So.
But you're Tag Me, so who cares? let that NBN guy psychograph you. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't see it being played because again, it'll be a meta call, and unless the meta goes crazy into traces, which I don't see it happening, I don't.
You see usually a couple per Corp deck on things like Caduceus. And is it Shadow? Shadow doesn't have a trace on it, I don't think.
No.
There's a few little ices, but for the most part, no. It's I don't think
Draco.
Yeah.
I vote that we move Nasir to the end because
Sounds good.
as an ID, he's going to require a lot of conversations. So let's just go ahead and pop over him.
But that means I'm not gonna do him.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, actually it does. You're still the last guy.
I did. Sweet.
Yeah.
So you'll get social.
Social engineering. 2 costs, event priority. Play only as your first click. By the way, we already talked about how that is a nice way to add an advantage, disadvantage, and a nice little way to balance the cards, yeah. Choose an unres piece of ice. If the Corp reses that piece of ice, gain credits equal to its res cost.
If there's this turn.
Yeah, they read this turn.
This turn, yes. It's good. If it wasn't play your first click, it would have been sick to play with Cyber Threat.
That would have been pretty silly.
That would have been awesome, But then again, FFG I guess found that out, and that's why they put that play as your first click. It's a kind of a way is, hey, res that ice, give me most likely more credits than it cost me to break it, and it's going to try to not the Corp is going to think twice of resing that ice, and if they don't res it, great, you just you pass it. If they do, and hopefully has it end the run early on you, okay, boom, I face planted. Eli, okay, give me 3 credits. Bastion, if I wouldn't play it, but it's a good design.
It's a meta call or a very specific deck type to play with it, because the worst thing you want to see is you drop this on a piece of ice that's 3 cost or less, because you have not made your money back. If you make it on a 3 cost piece of ice, you've made your cash back. You need to land it on a 4 to make a buck, is the problem with it. And I tried this out last week, and I think I dropped it on like a quandary, and I was the saddest person on the planet.
The only time that is different is when you drop this using prepaid voice pad. If you have, if you all of a sudden you turn those recurring credits into real credits.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think without some kind of expose, I don't think I'd want to play. I don't think I'd spend the click or the bucks on this card.
That, and it advertises where you're going to run too, which is the other problem I have with it, because we all know that tricking the Corp into resing ice on other servers that you actually don't care about is a valid strategy in the game to then get into where you do care about. And so you drop this on R&D and you say, okay, now you know I'm going to run here. But more importantly, I think you actually use this as a feint card too. You could, now that I think about it, you drop this on another server and you say, all right, now you think I'm going to run here, but then at the same time, it's like, then you still have to make the run, you know, because otherwise you're just going to go, I don't really care, you're just going to run R&D anyways. So
if it had the run built into it, it would have made amazing.
If this had the run built in like Cyber Threat did, it would be fantastic. Basically, choose a piece of ice, run. If they res that ice, gain credits. Maybe this works because of Nasir, who we'll talk about at the end because of his ability, so we'll get into that in a little bit. But
I don't think
The timing on him is...
Yeah.
The timing on... Actually, no, the timing on this card is fantastic for him, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Leprechaun.
so good.
No, it is not.
So good.
Alright, so Leprechaun. Shaper. Two credits, 1 MU, two influence. Program Demon, Leprechaun can host up to 2 programs. The memory cost of hosted programs do not count against your memory limit. And I'm going to let Kate herself explain why this is not bad. I'm going to do the first time on this cast. I'm actually going to read the fluff because it's very important. I once saw someone running a 7-tier nested demon tree. Not for any good reason, just to see if he could. Well, of course, the root demon crashed and he lost everything. I wonder what he's up to now. There's so much program trashing in this game that you run this and it gets popped and you have 2 icebreakers sitting on it, you're now a sad, sad person. Time and time again, we have seen that hosting programs on other programs is bad. There is so much program trashing in the game currently that this just begs me to see the runner put this on the board so I can then kill whatever he's hosted on it. And on top of that, I have yet to see a deck being built by Shaper that's starved for MU. It just doesn't exist right now. Maybe it's coming. Maybe somebody somewhere will be like, I'm going to run every breaker suite in the game because why not? But I think you're just hurting your gameplay at that point. I think this is one of those cards that is in there for maybe a very specific deck design that I just can't think of in my head right now. Maybe something like the Professor or something along those lines where you just want to have a ton of programs installed in general. But I am always leery in a game where I can get a 1-for-3 return on my investment. So I install this, I drop 2 programs on it, then I hit a Grim and I go, I'm sad, you know?
All right.
And it's just like, what's the one out of Anarch that I can't think about? Jin, same thing. You host a bunch of programs on it, it gets trashed, now you're sad. You know?
Here's my counter to that. Good players will make this card amazing, bad players make every card bad.
Yeah.
If you're installing cards on this and making runs when you don't have a Sentry Breaker out, you're dumb.
Bad times. Bad times is a thing that exists now.
Bad times makes this better. If I install my Morningstar and my Magnum Opus on a Leprechaun, that is 4 MU in a 1 MU slot.
Agreed.
Which means that, oh, I go down to 2 MU. Well, this is probably one of the 2 MU I keep.
No, I can see that, yeah.
If you double bad times me, it didn't matter that it was installed. Everything's gone at that point.
Yeah.
I think that this card is going to enable people to play Magnum Opus and other 2 memory things. Because currently, if you have if you have Magnum Opus installed, you can't really install a Sneak Door Beta because you still need to have some MU for your Icebreakers, whereas the 4 MU from that would eat it up. Now, that 4 MU goes to 1. As long as you have a Sentry Breaker out that can kill Roto Turret, Archer, Grim, so basically you need to be able to get to a 6-strength Sentry Breaker, or you need to have Parasites to get those things down to, like, say, Mimic level.
But at the same time, don't you feel like that already takes a slow Shaper deck and slows it down even more?
I don't think so. I think this is one click to buy me a bunch of extra MU.
Well, what I'm saying is if you're not going to run now even more critically until you have that Sentry Breaker in play, whereas before at least the Shaper, the worst you lose, it's a program. Now, are you really going to run without a Sentry Breaker?
This is where the most magical card comes out, the self-modifying code.
Yeah, test run.
Which makes for expensive.
Exists, yes.
Makes your Sentry Breaker more expensive, but it means you can grab it when you actually need it.
Yeah.
Alright.
Honestly, I think this is a card that's been missing for a while. Ever since I saw Jin in the core set, I said, "Where's the one that can host just any card you want?"
But at the same time, why not just run a mem chip? They get the same effect for something that's a lot harder to trash.
Can you show me
Taurus.
Can you show me a Taurus?
Taurus.
Can you show me a mem chip that costs 2 and gives me 3 MU?
No, but they can give you Link too, which
4.
is the other benefit.
No one plays traces.
Yeah, no one traces at all.
I'll paper tripping my traces away. Traces away.
Alright, so now we have the 2, probably the most controversial cards in the pack from what I've seen both on the internet and from my own internal review of the pack, so it'll be interesting to get into these two.
Sharp?
Yeah.
Really?
A lot of people are really torn on this card, whether it's really good or really bad, and Yeah, I think the community's split 50-50.
Cost
on it.
influence.
It does.
I keep forgetting to look for influence on neutral cards.
It does.
Oh, is it me? Alright. Eden Shard is a 7-cost resource, a virtual, and it's the source. Whenever you make a successful run on R&D, instead of accessing cards, you may install Eden Shard from your grip, ignoring all costs. It has on it, when it's in play, you can trash it to force the corp to draw 2 cards, and it's limit 1 per deck. One thing I want to touch on before I even get to the card, reading the little fluff pamphlet that came with Upstalk told me a lot about this. It's very, the 3 shards are very cool, because one of the themes behind this entire block is that Nasir, who we'll talk about next, is a cyber explorer who is out in the net looking for the source, the place where the net comes from. These shards are supposed to be the key to getting into the source or to the source itself, which is just a very cool little, like, it has absolutely nothing to do with the game, but they've put so much thought into this backstory behind their universe, and it just seemed like a very cool thing. Now to this, the card itself. So you make a run on R&D, you can plop a 7-cost card into play rather than accessing cards. Rather than accessing all of the cards. So if you have R&D interface, you're giving up 2 or 3 cards for Eden Shard. What this does, that then gives you the option to trash it to force the corp to draw 2 cards. This can lead to some good stuff. You can get, if the corp gets low on cards in deck, you can actually force them out of the game by trashing them, getting them down to 0 cards with a draw. But I think what it really does, if you dig 2 or 3 cards with R&D and don't see an agenda, you trash Eden Shard, you force them to draw 2 cards off the top, and you make a run again to see all new cards.
This is a very much a win condition card. This is the card that you hope to get in your opening hand or very early in the game when you get an R&D free and you're only getting 1 access, you install it and you let it sit for the entire game. You get to the late game and one of 2 things is either going to happen. You're going to be on game point for the corp, you're going to be on game point for yourself, or as you said, the corp's going to be on the verge of decking themselves, and that's where this becomes powerful. You go and you run, and even in our final match you saw with my 6 accesses, I only pulled 1 agenda that time.
Yep.
Imagine if I'd had this and they would have forced you to draw the top 2 cards of your deck, make another run, and I would see 2 new cards essentially.
Yep.
That could be the game right there for a lot of players. How many times have you lost a game as the runner when you're accessing 3-4 cards out of R&D, then you ask them to flip the top cards, and what was it? It was the 5th or the 6th card down.
I never do that because it makes me mad.
Yeah, but it's happening.
Because that's what the agendas always are.
Yeah.
They're the next card.
So there's a lot to be said about being able to do that, and I'm interested to see too is if we eventually end up with something on the runner side that gives you more of a benefit for the number of cards in the corp's hand beyond what we've already seen. So maybe there's going to be some advantage down the road if the corp has X number of cards, do X, or whatever the case may be.
I want a sweep for my runner.
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly.
Just laugh at cerebral imaging and be like, I'll take 22 credits, thank you.
So I think where a lot of people got confused on this card originally is they misread the part where you install it for free if you make a successful run, and they just looked at it as a 7-cost resource that lets the corp draw 2 cards. Why would I ever want to do that?
That was bad.
Maybe even we'll see something down the road because the shards are so important, something that says if you have all 3 of them in play, get X,
That would be kind of cool. Or if all 3 are in your discard pile because you've used them.
Yeah, maybe you can use them. Maybe you end up with a card called the Source at some point in time in the future that's worth agenda points, and you basically, the requirement to score it is you had to have triggered all 3 of the shards, whatever the case may be.
They already like the source.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, not this version of the Source.
Call it
actual.
the real source.
Yeah. So the shards that we've seen in the draft packs, we've already seen some of the other ones too, if I remember correctly.
We've seen all 3.
Yeah.
Hades, Utopia, and Eden.
Exactly.
Well,
So
those are agendas.
No,
there's
well, that's the thing. There are fragments, which are the agendas, and there are shards, which are on the runner side. All 3 of them are 7-cost resources that install from their appropriate runs.
But this is cool because it's a 1 influence, which, there are decks when you build where you end up extra influence, just as the way it works, there's no reason to go out of house to get something if you can get it in-house, right?
1 per deck is a healthy balance for these.
Well, the good part about that is it makes it easy from a deck building choice too. I don't have to think, am I going to run more than 1 of these? I'm just going to run 1. And if I'm an R&D person, I'm always going to want to run 1 because it's that, if I need to win this turn, because I know you're going to win next turn, and I run and I don't see anything on the top of your deck, draw those 2 cards, so I have 1 more run left of me, maybe I get the game point. And you don't want to be that player that ends up in that situation where you go, well, that's the game because I can't make you draw that card, and instead, there's always that chance to do so.
And a couple of, whenever I look at a card, is red flags. Limit point per deck is a red flag. Meaning is
Card's powerful.
exactly means that FFG tested it and they saw power in it. Okay, it's now up to us, the players, to find that power and abuse it.
interesting play note on this card. I think this is a fantastic thing when you're as the runner does specifically have like massively important things to do on the turn. If you've run R&D and already seen that there's a dead card on top of it, so basically a non-agenda, non-trashable card, and the corp either isn't rezzing the ice in front of R&D or doesn't have ice in front of the R&D, run it again and throw this down. You save $7.
You know, another interesting interaction with this, and it's very niche, but you can always, those niche things sometimes win you games, is if you're running against like a tag and bag deck where they're digging for their scorches or their tagging cards, they have to keep those cards in their hand. And now being able to force them to go above their hand size before their turn even starts, and then they have to draw one for the corp draw too, forces them to make suboptimal decisions about what they're going to keep, and especially if you know what those 2 cards are. So you already know they have 2 scorches in their hand, and you know what those top 2 cards are pieces of ice that, you know, maybe they actually need, but they can't install now. There's some interesting combos that you can do with this, where it's like, you know, I'm going to make you make the suboptimal decision now about what you're going to keep in your hand too, you know, as other options.
So let's move to the big one.
One last note. Just remember it's a resource. If you drop it on turn 1 and you get tagged at some point, if I'm the corp, I'm trashing that thing, just because it seems important.
Yeah. Okay, we get the first new ID for this cycle. It's a Shaper. Has 1 link. His name is Nasir Meidan.
Yep.
Okay. Sounds about right.
They're made up words, absolutely.
Cyber Explorer. He's a cyborg. Whenever you encounter a piece of ice that was rezzed, lose all credits in your credit pool. Gain credit equal to the res cost of that ice. He's 45-15. Okay.
This one actually requires rules explanation.
Yes.
Yeah. You guys will do that. I love it in a sense it's a runner that plays outside the box. Okay? Any ID you can grab and kind of easily, if I make a noise deck, okay? Yes, he's good with viruses, but I can easily swap with Wizard, and I can still play the deck. This ID you can't. You have to build your deck around it. You have to. Same thing with Cade and Chaos Theory. You could easily swap them, and it's not going to affect your deck. This one you have to build a deck around it.
Yep.
Sounds like a weird ability, but it has potential because if you hit an ice, again, that's most ice, I'll say like 80% or maybe more than that, have their res cost higher than their strength.
Plus number of subroutines.
Yeah, and a close number of subroutines. And so the money you get from them being rezzed, you will usually have enough to break the subroutines of that piece of ice. That's not counting any other programs you have that gives you recurring credits. Toolbox sounds like a great console to play with him.
Cyber feeders.
Cyber feeders.
Anything that
Anything
gives
gives
you
you
recurring
recurring
credits.
credits to use is...
He's going to want to use the stealth breakers. He's going to want to use anything that says, I get extra bucks outside of my credit pool. What I like about him is it's the first ID we've actually seen in the game that truly allows two-dimensional play at the game table between the corp and the runner. Because now the corp has to make very specific decisions that impact the runner directly in the middle of a run. That's not just, I'm rezzing ice to just res ice.
Sure. You're not just trying to stop them, you're actually modifying their credit pool as and forcing them to react to it as fast as possible.
Now imagine the math as the corp with this ID. I have to say, can I afford that ice? Do I want to res that ice? Because it may give him a surplus of credits, you know. Oh no, wait,
Yeah, it equals to the cost. Whatever you spend, he gets.
oh yeah, but any remainder, he'll lose it for the next ice.
But this is where, okay, I'm going to say the rules real quick here.
Yeah.
Because I've built this deck. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I've built Nasir. And in building the deck, I went back to the rulebook 4 or 5 times to reread the structure of how to do a run. So the important part, the part that's really key to him is sections 2 and 3 of the run. Section 2 is when you approach an ice. As you go into that, when you get to the point where you've approached the ice and the corp has the option to res it, there are player action windows there. That means that when the corp reses their piece of ice, before you've encountered it, so you still have your old money, you can spend your old money on things. You can spend it on Personal Workshop to get cards off of Personal Workshop. You can spend it through self-modifying code or clone chips to get new programs, get programs back or get new programs. You can spend it on icebreakers such as Gordian Blade, Pipeline, and Battering Ram that maintain their strength through an entire run to bump their strength. A usual icebreaker such as like, say Corroder for example, if you bump the strength on it, you can do it there to spend your money, but it doesn't do you any good because once you encounter a new piece of, once you actually encounter the piece of ice, it resets back down to its base strength. So at 2.3, once they've chosen to res it, you can spend all of your money because you're not going to have it after you encounter the ice anyway. At that point, you then go into section 3, which is where you actually encounter the ice. At this point, anything that involves encountering an ice triggers, which includes his ability where you're gaining money, where you're losing all of your current money and gaining money equal to whatever they spent, and other things. This is where you might be able to trigger Femme Fatale to bypass. This is where Toll Booth is going to cost you $3. And an important note that as the first player, you choose what order those resolve in. So if you want to get $8 off of a Toll Booth, you choose to resolve the part where it says you spend $3 or end the run. Okay, that ends your run. You still resolve all of the rest of what encountered, and you get your $8, and you have $8 to spend on the rest of your clicks, or just to keep till your next run. I think this is one of those runners where, knowing those rules and knowing them well, I get the feeling you're going to have to explain to your opponents once or twice exactly how that part of the run works, and it's going to be an important part of that game is making sure they understand what's going on. So it does, because at certain points it looks like I spend all my money. You res your ice, cool. I haven't encountered yet. I spend all my money, now I get new money. That feels like cheating to me. That's double dipping. It's a good time.
So the interesting thing about him is he's going to be a great early game runner, and at the mid and late game, his ability no longer works because once all the ice is rezzed, he's just another runner at that point. Which is where you get the benefit of things like Kate and some of the other shapers, where their abilities will persistently give you throughout the game. Not to say he's bad at all.
Oh, I think you can build that as a strength actually. Yeah. My deck, I'm running Crescentus. So once I've broken a piece of ice, say for example I managed to break my way through a piece of ice, you can trash Crescentus to de-res that piece of ice, which means that the next time you go through, you know what it is, and they've got to spend the money to res it again, and you're getting a whole new stack of credits.
Yep, you made me splash the criminal one.
Yeah, emergency shutdown.
Emergency shutdown.
Yep. The reason I ran Crescentus is because it's only one influence.
Yeah.
However, Nasir does have some huge disadvantages. Cheap ice, kill him. They make him sad. Pop-up window is probably the saddest thing you'll see because literally you hit it, your credits reset to 0, and you don't have you actually have to break the subroutine on pop-up window. Otherwise, it's going to end your run because you have no dollars. Important things to know with him as well is where your credits go. Stim Hack, fantastic card with him until you hit an ice. Then all those Stim Hack credits go away because Stim Hack adds credits to your pool. And this is another thing actually to look up. Recurring credits do not go into your pool. They stay on their appropriate card where they came from, which means that your toolbox will keep its $2 no matter how much ice they res until you use it.
So you know what's interesting with him? I actually wonder if you'll start to see the recurrence of Darwin because of him. Because Darwin decks already want to run all the recurring credits in the world to make Darwin usable.
Yeah.
And it seems like a fantastic breaker to run from Nasir. Because Darwin's so cheap to break once you get him up to strength. You're going to be running all the recurring credits anyways. And he's actually a lot more efficient than most of the stealth breakers are. Now, of course, you run into the no AI breakable ones, then you might have an issue. But nonetheless, it really seems like...
There's one of those. It's going to be alright.
Yeah.
And it'll hurt because it's going to trash your Darwin.
Yeah.
So maybe you run something to have a backup there.
Yeah.
But that's where clone chips come in and self-modifying codes.
So, you know, I've always been a big fan of Darwin. You guys saw I played at the Plugged In Tour, and I ran it out of Shaper. So, I mean... Maybe I switch it over and I try it with Nasir now because that was the one thing about Darwin that was always annoying was trying to make sure I always had enough credits. But now, well, hell, if he's at strength, I'll just run because no matter what you res, I'm going to have enough credits in theory to hopefully break it because you know what's up. Click on break.
But like Tree said, if you're planning to take this to a tournament or your local home or store tournament or just the normal league nights, make sure you make a copy of how to do a run.
Carry your rule book with
and
you
hand it to the TO.
Highlight it.
Yeah.
So because it wouldn't shock me if even the TO would not know the correct way of running.
Yeah.
Because he goes in depth. This runner, like Tree says, you can abuse it, and as soon as people see that, they're like, "That doesn't sound right." It is right, you know. And you have to know the complete structure of the run, so you understand how powerful this ability or disadvantage this ability is. So.
So, going into the tournament talk for a second with this guy, two things that I think are important about this. One, he requires a lot more thought than a lot of the other runners do.
Yep.
So you need to pay attention to how long the tournament's going to take to run because you're going to be burned out by the time you're done with the day and you get to your finals matches. We've seen it in Thrones with things like Heartburn and stuff like that.
Yes.
You always have to be cautious of playing those decks that require a ton of intense mental capacity to actually play the deck well and pilot well. The other thing is that Shaper has always notoriously been the slowest faction in the game. So playing them in a tournament where you're on a timed round, you always have to be careful. And so you want to make sure that if you're making your choice to play with Nasir, that you're playing him at least as just as fast as any other Shaper identity, if not faster, because he is going to slow the game down, because every time that somebody has a question about it, you're on the clock. There's no pausing the round timer to answer a question about how a run time goes and stuff like that. And you can't fault the opponent. I mean, you really can't sit there and argue with it's a complicated card to get right, and it's going to take some time, so.
However, it is the core mechanic of the game.
True.
Like the run is, if I had to go to a single core mechanic of the game, I think the run is the big Netrunner mechanic. So I think it's also good. This is going to push people into knowing the rules, the full extent of the rules properly. So.
And I think it's an ID designed for players, like I said, who knows the rules. This is not an ID to start as your first deck. You go crazy, you say this is a horrible thing. But the advantage is, like again, Tree said, you get to abuse because it is designed for, I don't want to say smart players because it sounds bad, but for people, experienced players. That's the perfect word.
This is not something you want to run a demo with. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a reason why it's coming out at the time it did,
Sure.
and it's not one of the first identities we've ever seen.
That said, this is my favorite card out of the pack. I'm super excited to play it. I'm dying to play it.
Yeah, because something new. It's completely,
so far out of the box compared to every other, and it's really like the first, in my opinion, the first really revolutionary.
So this is why I'm excited we got this just before Gen Con and Worlds, because I want to see if there's any Shaper ID, like specific. If any Shaper ID is going to upset Kate, it's going to be him. So I want to see if it actually does it. I want to see if people actually.
Are we going to see something that does what Catman did last year and just shows up and shocks everybody?
Yeah.
I hope so. I'm always excited when that happens.
I know. So.
Okay, guys, thank you for joining us, and again, thank you for Tree and Angelo for coming here and giving us your thoughts. So
Nasir forever.
Hey, if you're going to Gen Con, good luck. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll be looking forward to the tournament.
I'll be there.
Look for Jesus. He will be there. So.
And I'll try to bring some video footage and stuff like that. So thank you, guys.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.